Hi guys, this is Niman and you can say it this time
With Martin Fournier-Giguère.
for BlueFirePoker.com. This is going to be what is this part six of our series um, of analyzing my 400 NL session with Martin. I assume most of you have watched the first four parts. There'll probably be this part and one more part before we will get into Martin's play in his session.
All right.
All right, let's roll. We're picking up the action right where we left off last time.
All right. And I see that you open that King 4 and you check the flop,
Yeah,
which
you
is
agree?
pretty interesting.
Um, yeah. What do you, I mean? Here's the problem is that if I bet the flop, two of the three players that are in the hand have position on me. If I bet the flop, first of all, if I get raised, I might be folding the best hand to a draw. Second, but I'm not as worried about that as I am if I bet and just get called. I'm going to be in a position where I'm going to be, uh, you know, able to be bluffed. You know what I mean? Because uh, a player could call this with a better king, and not raise. Somebody had king jack or king queen could just call, but at the same time, a call might mean a hand like ace ten, spades, all kinds of straight draws, not just the queen jack, but ace jack or something people might continue with once, so on. So I don't want to, by betting on the flop, if I get called, I put myself in a position of weakness when I check the turn. Do you know what I mean? And
Yeah, I totally agree with the check here for all reason that you've said, just because, like you said, when someone plays back at you, you don't have a clue what to do on most turn cards. You're like super screwed. You can't bet again for value because you're kind of over representing your hand, especially because you were four on the flop. So if you bet two streets here for value, it's likely to be with something better than king four. So they're not gonna pay you with worse. And if you start checking, then you can get bluffed out of your hand just because people are gonna have some pretty strong hands here, like king jack, king queen, or even a set and stuff like that. And if spades come, you could get bluffed or whatever. So, and I think this is something that I don't see enough people doing, checking that type of board in multi pots. The other important thing is that when you check and when get checks around and it breaks exactly how it happened, when it checks again, it comes back to you. Nobody's gonna believe that you have a king, so they're gonna pay you off with pair of tens almost every time here. You're gonna bet the turn, someone calls, breaks the river, you bet again, you're gonna get called by a 10 most of the time just because you didn't bet the flop. So betting that flop, I think, would have been a very big mistake and something that I see everyone do just for the name of protection because there are four people in it and there are a lot of draws, so you want to protect your end. But I think just playing the situation as it is going and having a plan for next streets makes you realize that you're gonna get screwed a lot if you bet here, and if people are willing to continue, well, you're just screwed. You won't know what to do.
yeah, I agree 110% with that. And I just want to add to that and make a reference to something we talked about in the fourth part of this video, which we had just recorded earlier tonight. And that was, we had talked sort of in very vague terms about the initiative and the right of the initiative. And in most cases in poker, if you can seize the initiative, it's a good thing. But in certain cases, it's actually a bad thing. It's a responsibility that you don't want to have. And this is one of those cases. And what I mean by that is, if I bet this flop and I get called, especially behind me by Miguel or Chico, now I have the responsibility of the initiative. Meaning, if I am really have the hand that I'm representing, if I have a big hand, then on this draw heavy board, I would never check again on the turn. So therefore, if I check the turn, it can't be a trap because uh, this is not the type of board that I could trap with. I would have to bet again. So then I now have the responsibility of the initiative, where if I give that up and check, I'm just telegraphing weakness. Notice that this is very different than if I check the flop, they bet, and I called. Now, if some draw completing card hits and they don't have it, they can, and I check again, I could very well be checking, going for a check raise, lurking, waiting to trap. However, if I bet the flop and then I check the turn, very rarely do they have to worry about me.
I totally agree, and I love your idea of like giving out the initiative in certain spots that you just don't want the initiative because you won't know what to do with it because every option with it is gonna suck, and that's a great example of that kind of spot. That's very well said.
Yeah, thanks. Cool. And that's sort of last time when we talked about the initiative and what it means and why you should have it or why you should not have it, we didn't really get into a lot of specifics. I just said you guys should think about it, and we left it at that. This is a good example of that, where it's better to not have the initiative because it becomes a burden.
Yep. And it just conceals the strength of your hand as well.
Yeah, so yeah. Of course.
At advantage. You're gonna get drowned out of your hand like more, but it's not that bad. Oh, you just gotta walk with aces.
Yeah, that was...
it's a sad day. I see that you actually open limped your small blind with King 7 there.
Yeah.
On table 4.
Yeah, it's not my standard, but it's Go ahead. What you want to say something about that?
I just actually wanted to ask you when you do it because I think it can be good against certain players in certain spots, but personally I just never ever do it because I'm too lazy and I just have my fingers on numbers for typing my raise, and every time it comes to me I like, okay, well, I fold or I raise, and I don't even think, and I think there are spots where I should limp instead, but I just wanted to hear why you when you do it and why you do it.
Yeah, I just do it sometimes just to preserve balance so that I can also limp with hands that I can, in a previous video I had talked about playing against a very good, very aggressive player, and I just limped when we were pretty deep, and I just limped with ace jack in the small blind. It's the kind of thing I would do against like you, for instance, if we were deep. The reason is if I raise and I get re-raised, it's overwhelmingly stands to be the best hand in a blind versus blind confrontation if you're re-raising a lot, but it's just disgusting to play in that kind of a situation.
Yep.
So I want to be able to limp with hands that I want to be able to play even if my opponent raises. And so basically, hands like ace, jack, or sometimes pocket threes, or 6-3 suited or something like that. That 6-3 suited might be pushing the envelope a little bit, but you know what I'm saying. The point is the hands that I don't want to fold, but if I open and they 3-bet me, I would have to fold.
And you do that against people who are 3-betting a lot and who are good at it and who are balanced at it.
Right. But now, King 7 is obviously not a hand that I was like dying to play. It's not like I have to play this. But in order to preserve my balance, like if I am always folding or opening my small blind, except for with these pretty good hands, then I become exploitable.
Yeah.
So therefore, I also sometimes limp with just completely random hands, simply to preserve my balance so that I can then limp with my ace 10s and pocket 4s and stuff.
Yep, totally agree.
Okay. So that's why the King 7 just happened to be one of the random hands.
All right.
That I was doing that just to preserve my balance. Now, obviously, I'm playing this one session here, 2-4. That's not normal, so it wasn't really that important for me to preserve my balance in such a subtle way. But maintaining my balance has become such a habit for me that I just do it anyway.
Okay. But if you're playing against people who are just not defending their big blind enough, then you do want to just go ahead and basically raise a lot on your small blind because there's just dead money here to be taken. So
yeah, I say this very often. People simply do not defend their blinds or fight to win the blinds often enough, and that's just a lot of money that you can win, in the long run, as accumulating that.
Yeah, I agree. Sorry.
Bless you.
Totally agree.
I see table 2 here.
Yep.
I bet the pot and picked it up. This is the kind of hand that sometimes I would check back. The reason is, obviously my hand is not good enough to call a check raise if he went for that. But at the same time, I do have some equity, with that gut shot straight draw. Plus, the nature of the board is such that if he checked again on the turn, I can still bet and represent a hand like pocket tens, pocket nines, pocket eights, or so on. You know what I mean? Whereas, you don't want to check back a hand where you will then lose credibility to bluff later. But in this case, I had two factors going for me. I could still represent a pretty good hand even after checking the flop on a later street, and I do have a little bit of equity with the gut shot.
Yeah, totally agree with that, and I might be a bit more inclined to do it with, let's say, 8-5 of clubs, like a low flush draw, because it's gonna even add a lot of concealment to my flush when I do hit it. Like, people don't expect you to check back a flush draw here, so he's gonna either make a move or pay you off very, very light when there's a club that hits. You could try to present it just because you never have it against some opponents. It's a pretty good move to make. But yeah, I do agree that 4-5 kind of falls into that range category too, and just to balance, just so you don't continuation bet too much, you do have to check back sometimes with air in order to like bluff at it later and represent, like you said, something like pocket 10 or pocket 9 here.
Exactly. Once again, without browbeating the topic that we've covered in the last couple of videos, it's again, a lot of it is about preserving your balance.
Yep. Against players who are aware of your balance.
Right.
And Chico looks like a pretty good regular, actually. He's on 3 of your tables. I don't know if he's good, but we know that he's playing a lot of games. So.
Yeah. It really hurts me physically to fold hands like Queen 10 suited.
Yeah.
Like, I really feel this like pains in my stomach when I click the fold button.
My remedy that I found is that I never ever fold them. It's not the best thing, but at least I don't get the pain that you're talking about.
It might be worth the loss of EV.
Yeah.
I think. I see hands.
Actually, it would not have been that bad to just ship it in that spot. I think it has to be like close to neutral EV because
yeah.
Like it. But you can't do it that often because you're gonna be very exploitable.
Table
Pretty
4 here.
Interesting dunk lead here.
Yeah, I think this is the kind of spot that I think I like to dunk lead because I do have the additional equity with the 7. I can pick up backdoor diamonds, and Phil is not a lunatic. He's very aggressive, but he knows that this is the kind of board that if I donk lead, I could very easily have a hand that I could bet 3-bet. You know what I mean? Because there's a ton of hands that not only are big hands, but also involve a pair and a draw, things that could race against any kind of an overpair. So therefore, I don't expect Phil to raise here with much. I think he's gonna call with the entire range of hands that he's gonna continue with. Plus, this is the kind of flop that I don't think he would or should continue with just random overs. Like, this is not the kind of flop that you can just call and float with ace queen or something like that. You know what I mean? So I'm sort of betting for protection in that regard, but also betting because I've got equity to pick up some other stuff later, and it's very unlikely that I'm going to get raised on this flop.
Absolutely agree. Perfect analysis of the dunk lead. Plus, it's a spot that you could go ahead and you can't really check raise. It would be pretty bad. It would be a bit of overplaying your hand, I think. And check calling is pretty good, but there are a lot of turn cards that are going to be super tricky to play. Any card that puts out a flush or whatever, if he bets again, you just don't have a clue where you are, and you overcard as well. So by leading, it's all about, like you said, taking the initiative and keeping him guessing. So you can have a very wide range, and like you said, he's not going to raise much, and you can still play the hand without putting that much money and keeping the initiative. So yeah, it was pretty perfect explanation.
Yeah, and just to give you a foil, earlier we talked about that King 4, where it's better to give away the initiative, and this is an example of where it's a good hand to seize the initiative.
Yep.
But watch table 1. If I remember this hand correctly, you this might be a pre-flop decision that yeah.
Actually, yeah, I was gonna ask. Okay, you folded.
Yeah.
That I think the 3 options are acceptable here. I think you can make a point for calling. I thought, although it might be the option that I kind of like the less because you're gonna be multi-way with ace jack offsuit, which really sucks multi-way, but you're on the button, so it kind of balances that. And re-raising certainly is good because you're squeezing and you still have some good end to back you up. But folding's alright as well if you're against some good players. And I think Eric, until I remember him from a while ago playing on full tilt, and he had a good idea of what he was doing. And you've got Philadang in the pot too, who's pretty good. Probably one of the best 2-4 players that you're gonna run into. So I think folding is super standard here. If let's say Philadang instead of Philadang was Goose, Galuk, then you do not want to fold that ace jack. You want to play as many pots as possible against these guys, but here, folding is super correct.
Yeah. Okay, good. I just wanted to. I think I wanted to bring that point up just because I think it's the kind of hand that's commonly misplayed among players out there, and possibly some of you watching this video. You look at a hand like that has absolute value, like ace jack, and you see the fact that you also have the button, and it's like, wow, there's no way I'm folding this. But if you
that's often how I see the situation personally.
but
but you have to know what you're doing post flop a lot. If you're making mistakes post flop, you're just jumping into a big trap to make some very big mistakes here.
Well, but even if you do know what you're doing post flop, even if you play this with skill, it's not going to be a hand like if remember, Eric on tilt and Philading are both very good players, and they're both in early positions. If you flop an ace or jack and you have the best hand, they're not going to go for a lot. But you will often flop a pair, and then it will take you additional money to figure out that it's not good, even if you're very skilled. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
obviously, the worst would be...
Totally agree.
Yeah. So even if you are very, very good and, you make good decisions, I still think it's a pretty standard fold given the dynamics of this hand, and often is. You've got 2 good players opening from early position and calling from early position, and even though you have the button, it's just simply not going to play well. And so yeah, it's a to me it was a very standard fold. I fold in that spot routinely, and I think it's the kind of thing that people don't do enough. You know what I mean? Like I would never fold if I had 8-6 suited there. Never. You know what I mean? I would never fold.
Totally agree.
Yeah, and I would never fold if I had pocket 2s there. But the ace jack is just a hand that has reverse implied odds only in that spot. You know, and so
basically when I do play it, I'm gonna play it sometimes. When I do play it, I'm almost looking to like flop over pairs or a gut shot or something like that. Because flopping top pair, like you said, is gonna just put you into a lot of trouble when you are putting money in the pot. I'm just looking for a board in which my position is gonna allow me to make some moves. And sometimes I'm gonna like flop the ace and it's gonna be good, but I don't expect to win a big pot. I just expect to try to get it showdown. But then again, I can do that with pretty much any 2 cards on the button on that spot. So defending ace jack here is really not better than defending like 8-6 like suited, and even offsuit for the record I would defend it on that button. I'm just calling so many hands here that ace jack is in the big range of hands that I'm calling just because I think I can take down the pot very often in that type of spot, but ace jack is one of the worst hands that I'm gonna play.
Yeah, well, 8-6 offsuit is much better than ace jack. The thing is, The point here is that if you call ace jack, you're calling it because you're going to try to use your position to take away the hand, but you're basically eliminating the value you have in making a hand.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And that's a lot of equity there. Whereas with 8-6, if you actually make, if you hit your 8, it's not likely to be duplicated. And if you make 2 pair, you are gonna get paid off by somebody who has pocket queens or something like that. Whereas that's not going to be the case with your ace jack. So that's That's the key. Okay, so yeah, I just wanted to bring that point up and discuss it, just because I see it pretty commonly misplayed. I just see people uh, automatically continue with a hand like that, whether
Yeah.
it's by three. And then the other mistake is sometimes to say, well, I'm definitely, the worst is to call here, I think, and because it's just too good for them to fold, quote unquote. But then the other reasoning to say, okay, well, if I can't quite call, let me three bet with it. That's still a little bit iffy. I don't hate a three bet here, but remember that when you three bet, you are playing your hand as a bluff. You're not
Yep.
you've turned your hand entirely into a bluff. So it's not and so make sure you realize that if you three bet, you're not doing it for value. You're doing it as a bluff, and then you have to handle it accordingly.
But it's still a bit better as a bluff than, let's say, like total air, like 10-5 offsuit.
Right.
Because
Because
you're gonna flap sometimes from time to time. That is gonna be good. Plus, you have position. So if you have the initiative of the three bet, it's gonna be a bit easier to realize when it is good and when it is not. So yeah, you're playing your hand as a bluff, but I do agree with your point.
Yeah, and the point is, it is better because you can flop a hand and win against a hand like pocket tens or something. But the point is, if you do three bet this, then if you do flop top pair, you can't just go berserk with it. You have to, yeah. So, okay.
All right. Let's say on table 4, you just followed king 8 offsuit in that spot.
Yep.
That was that looked a bit like I would defend king 8 suited in that multi-way pot on the bottom.
Yeah, especially with the
loose, but
no, I would too. I think with the openers coming from the hijack and the cutoff too, their range is likely to be a little bit thinner as well. So I mean, take that with a grain of salt, guys. You always have to play commensurate with your skill. This has to be this is part of being self-aware, like we talked about. I think that without meaning to brag, I think Martin and I have the skill that we can take a hand, take a disadvantage like king 8 suited, and still have it be a profitable spot, a plus EV spot for us. But you have to know where your skill set lies, and you obviously, you guys are Blue Fire members. You're interested in improving your game. As you improve, you can expand, your highs. And but you don't want to automatically say, okay, Martin and Niman would call king 8 suited, so that means I should call king 8 suited on the button. You just have to try to really have a good handle on basically on how good you are and how good your decision making process is, and then determine your hand range and what falls into the positive expectation accordingly. Don't just do it because we do it.
Yep, totally agree.
Check stat, open the small blind. I called with sixes, and I called his first continuation bet and folded second. I think it's fairly standard.
Do you like sometimes a bluff raise on that turn?
Yeah. Quite possibly sometimes, yeah, because I think it puts even a hand like Ace King into a difficult situation.
Yeah, because you're representing basically the turn straight, or something like King Queen, or even Queen 9, or maybe King 9. You might have raised a flop, but you're representing a lot of stuff, and like you said, it's gonna put something like Ace King difficult position. You want to go ahead and do it against someone that you think is gonna fold Ace King here, given your own image. But I think with your own image here, the guy probably knows that you're, even if you're not that aggressive, like he's gonna assume that you're aggressive just because you're playing loose. So I think it's just not as good, but it's still pretty good from time to time on that type of board. Bluff raising that turn would have been a good idea, and even a better idea if you would have been deeper. Because if you would have been deeper here, he can't just go ahead and stack off with like Ace King. He's gonna be in bad spot unless he has like the nuts himself.
Right, and that the Queen was a very good card for that because
King
that's
Queen
exactly
Queen
why 9
I was talking about it. Just because the queen was a perfect card, basically.
Right, right. Interesting spot here on table 3. As you can see, I opened Ace Jack, and then I'm getting re-raised here. What is your thought process here? It's kind of weird, right? Because Shiko did not 3-bet me pre-flop, so therefore, it's not very likely that he has Ace King or even Ace Queen. So it's a little bit weird. I mean, my hand looks like the nuts, but at the same time, there's no flush draw on board. What exactly is he putting this raise in with? If he's doing it for value, he's actually more likely to have me beat here.
Yeah, totally agree. It is pretty weird here, and it is pretty tricky of a spot. I saw that he just check raised you two on a like Jack 4 deuce board when he check raised you after calling from the blind like 2 ends ago, and now he's raising you here. It's gonna that spot depends 100% of on the player. Sorry. I don't know if you have a read on Chico, and other than he's opening a lot of hands, without a very great read here, the range that you have to put like in a vacuum against someone that you think he has a pretty good idea of what he's doing, you've got to put him a range of something like Ace Jack himself, Pocket Jack sometimes, big part of Pocket Deuce, or like Ace Deuce suited, plus all the gut shot, King Jack, King 10, Queen, King, and maybe something like, I don't know, 3-5 or something like that.
Right.
Plus some random total air. So the truth is, when there's a lot of money going in here, you're not doing that great just because Pocket Deuce is such a big part of his range here. But you want to adjust that range based on what you know about players. Some players are going to have a big part of their range being air here, as other players are going to have like 90% of their hands being Pocket Deuce, and they're not going to ever play any hand like that way, like other than Pocket Deuce. So that's all about playing the player here, and not only putting him on a certain range of hands, but there's a certain percentage for every type of hands that he's gonna have. You can go ahead and say that he might have a gut shot a lot here, but some players, some tight nits, just don't ever do that even with a gut shot.
Right, and there's no flush draw and there's no open-ended straight draw. So, yep. That's a really good point, because I think when you're deciding, whether to go with your hand or not, you need to ask yourself 2 questions. The second of the 2 questions is, well, I'll just put them both together. The first is what percentage of the time is your opponent bluffing here? And on a board like this, the bluffs are reduced because they're only gut shots, and it's on an ace-high board against me as the pre-flop raiser. There's the flush draw and no open-ended straight draw to semi-bluff. So therefore, the bluffing frequency is a little bit reduced depending on opponent. I mean, a lot of opponents will and should raise gut shots and stuff here. But given that dynamic, supposing you were to conclude that the overwhelming majority of the time a particular opponent his raise is for value, now you need to ask yourself how your hand does against his value range. And hands that look really good really aren't that great necessarily. And let me give you sort of a hypothetical example. But this is one that lots of players are like this. Let's suppose I was playing against a player who was pretty tight and would not raise a gut shot here. He would either float with it or fold it. There's tons of players like that. Now, additionally, let's say he's not the type to call a pre-flop raise with ace-deuce suited. If you put those 2 things together, this is a very easy fold for me. It's not, which sounds shocking to some of you, I'm sure. God, I've got top 2 pair. But if he's not bluffing on this board, and some players won't, and he doesn't have ace-deuce, I'm not beating anything. The best I can hope for is to chop with ace-jack. So, this is another example, and a lot of these come up, of evaluating the strength of your hand as a relative thing, not as an absolute thing. You know, there's very few hands that he can have in an absolute sense that beat me here. But the problem is there's very few hands that he can raise with here. Um, if I don't remember what I was thinking about Chico and what my read on him was, but if he's the type to not raise a gut shot here, there's very few hands that he can raise with that aren't beating me. So when you add in the conditional probability factor of the fact that he's raised, all of a sudden my hand isn't doing that great.
I totally agree, and I want to use that discussion to bring up a point that might be one of the most important points that I'm going to talk about, guys. And that is the fact that a lot of guys are so afraid of making mistakes when they are playing poker that in that type of spot, when they like, let's say they have two pairs, any board or whatever, and they feel like they have to stack off with it. And if they're wrong, they know they can rely on calling it a cooler. Oh, I had two pair. I could not fold. I was being cooler. So they don't feel the guilt of having made a mistake because they have that excuse, that big excuse that okay, it was a cooler. And I see people stacking off with like two pairs or stuff like that in spots where like their opponent never ever has worse. But I know that, and I see people live. I see some of my friends pretty good at this game. Friends playing like 2-4 or whatever. They're like staring at a hand while they're playing, and they're like, "Oh shit, man! I know I'm beaten, but it's gonna be a cooler." Like the best example is like bottom set on a super deep situation. You flop bottom set, and then you get check raise, and the guy bets, and you know he's never doing that as a bluff. You're like, I'm always beat, but cooler, man, and they call down. That is like the worst idea, the worst thing you can do. Like avoiding coolers is gonna save you so much money in the long run when you understand when you can avoid the coolers, and when you really start to get a good hold of how everybody's playing and stuff like that. You are gonna realize that you can avoid almost half of the coolers that you are getting. I think I've made myself an expert at avoiding coolers post flop and pre flop in some certain situation, and you do want to go ahead and never use the term cooler as an excuse for stacking off. Never ever. I see that all the time, and just stop doing it, guys. Nothing is ever a cooler in poker. I can see myself folding the second nuts very often because I know my opponent has nuts. Yes, it is cooler, but I'm gonna save money, and a lot of money, because that those are the very big pots, the quote unquote coolers. Those are always are the big pots. So when you do happen to save monies in those kind of pots, that money adds up so quickly. It's like printing money. Even if you're losing the end every time, if you find a way to save yourself some money in spots where other players aren't saving monies, then you've just improved your big blinds, your big bet ratio by super huge amounts.
Yeah, I mean, you're saving, not losing money.
Yeah,
a certain amount is just as valuable as winning that same amount of money.
yeah.
So
And just bottom line is just never ever use the word cooler as an excuse to stack off in a certain spot. You still, even if you feel like, man, I can't fold top two pair here, you always can. If you know you're beaten, fold it. Don't like I said, don't be afraid of like feeling. I'm gonna get back to it. I kind of lost my idea, but yeah, don't use the word cooler. I know that you're afraid of making a mistake, so when you have something to back your mistakes, you're not afraid of doing mistakes because you're like, it might be a mistake, but when I'm gonna tell that hand to my friends, I will be able to say, oh, it was a cooler, so I won't look stupid. But even if you have that excuse, you want to still be able to save yourself money in this kind of spot.
Yeah,
that's pretty much it.
that was fantastic, Martin, and I actually want to add my support to what you said. What Martin just talked about may be the single. I mean, I haven't watched all the videos, but it's the most important thing that I've heard in any video on Blue Fire. So really, I really want to emphasize that point because it is so important. to improve as a poker player, you have to have responsibility for your own decisions. Yep. You have to take responsibility, which means that if you have to be able to understand when you're doing things correctly, which people do, but you have to be able to accept responsibility for when you make mistakes. If you don't accept responsibilities, if you write it off as an excuse, as a cooler, well, then what you've done is you've created a situation where you're going to make that same kind of mistake again. Nobody is above making mistakes. I make them all the time. Martin makes them all the time. Phil makes them all the time. However, what allows us to achieve the kind of results that we do is that we are constantly looking at ourselves and saying, like, I don't remember what happened in his hand, and I may have gone re-raised him, and maybe that's even the correct play given Chico's tendencies here and stuff. I don't really remember. But if I were to stack off here, I would look back and say, should I have realized that the overwhelming majority of his range here is pocket twos? And if that is, I'm not going to turn around and tell my buddy, hey, it sucked. I lost a big pot. I flopped, top two pair. What could I do? My opponent had bottom set. No, I'm going to say, look at that situation. There was no draw on the flop. There was no, no open-ended straight draw, no flush draw, and yet my opponent kept going at me hard, and I paid him off. I made a mistake, and it's that ability to take responsibility for myself that I have, that Martin has, that the top players have, and that more than anything else is the most important thing in your poker improvement.
Yep, that's pretty much it. Actually, I remember when I started, like, I kind of woke up someday and realized that every single time I lose a big pot or a stack or my whole stack or whatever, I still do it every single time, but I don't know when I started it, and it's not that long ago, and it made me improve so much, is that every single time I lose a big pot or a stack, I look back at the end, and my only question is, could I have avoided this? No matter how big of a cooler it looked like, even if it's kings against aces, every time I'm asking, could I have folded this? And a lot of times on spots that appear to be, oh no, you could not have folded this. Everybody, if I ask people, they will tell me, no, you couldn't have folded this, it's cooler. I know that for some reasons, if it is flow of the game or whatever, I could have gotten away from this end. And when you start being so self-aware that you're gonna realize that, okay, that spot I could have folded it, that spot, like ask the question every time you lose a stack, could you have avoided it? And the answer is gonna be yes, a lot more than you think, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And another thing though is, remember that you're always playing against a range. And just to use Martin's kings versus aces example, let's say that there's a few raises back and forth, and let's say you're playing deep, and it goes raise, re-raise, 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 ship, or whatever, however many it takes. Raise, re-raise, re-raise, ship, let's say. Okay? And let's say that this particular opponent is going to have aces the overwhelming majority of the time in that action, and you pay him off with kings. That wasn't a cooler. That was your error. However, it's possible that you're playing against an overly aggressive opponent that has done the same thing, and his range in that spot is aces, kings, queens, and jacks. And you call it off with your kings, and you lose to aces. You haven't made a mistake there. You've made the right play and with against the range, and you happen to be against the wrong end of the range that time. So that's another thing you guys always should be thinking about.
You want to be able to identify what is a cooler and what is not a cooler, and when you understand and when you realize what is not a cooler, you are printing money basically, because other people at your level are still gonna be seeing coolers where there are spots that it's not a cooler. So if you save yourself that money that they are not saving, you are making a lot less mistakes than them, because it's big pots, so you are making a lot of money. So that's it, I think.
Yeah, exactly. No, great point.
So let's see what happens.
So yeah, that being said, before I run the video, now this isn't necessarily an argument for folding here. I think that Chico's fairly aggressive, And if he's got a lot of, if he's got a lot of gut shots in his range, of which he won't continue barreling them, I don't, it's not necessarily a bad play for me to come back over here. I don't remember the game flow and what I was thinking about at the time. I just want to point out that this is the kind of situation that against certain kinds of players I could fold. I'm not necessarily saying that that's the case with this particular player in this time.
Yeah, I agree, and I think this situation, this kind of spot, is one very good example of like a flow thing. Like I said, some spot. I said that earlier in this video or in another video. I think it was in part 5, but whatever. The correct play here could be against that guy, that board, those stacks. It could be to call and then check all streets, or it could be to re-raise the flop, depending on just when in the game this is happening. If you think you think that you're kind of fed up with him going over the top with all your bets, and this could be a spot where you could bluff by re-raising here, then you do want to go ahead and re-raise here. But if you think he thinks that you're never ever bluffing here, then you do not want to re-raise. You do want to like either call and then check fold somewhere in the hand, or if he could be bluffing, like call and then check call down. If like I said, it's just a thing that you want to incorporate in your game, being able to perceive what your opponent thinks about you and about him and about how you view him at a certain point in the hand and in a game flow, so that you make the right move to lead him into a mistake. Here, I think, I'm not exactly sure. I think if you re-raise here, he could perceive that as weakness because you just check raised you on another board like 2 hands ago. And in that spot, I think if you re-raise, you could see that as weakness because you know that he has like a lot of gut shots in his range given the nature of the board. So you could be doing that with like basically total air. So sometimes he's going to float the re-raise and then try to bluff you off later at the end. Or sometimes he's just going to ship a gut shot and try to make you fold your air basically.
Yeah. Okay, so with all that build up, let's see what I did. Okay, so
it's starting to suck. It's like the worst turn.
Yeah,
all right.
that was a pretty hideous turn card. Actually, you know what? I just remembered my thought process in this hand. I believe because I played this a long time ago, it was months ago, but I just remembered. I had actually, and so this, I'm just saying this, you guys can believe me or not believe me, but this is to back up the conversation that we just had, the analysis. I had decided that after calling the raise, I was going to check and fold no matter what the turn card was, unless it was an ace or a jack, because I think his range was weighted. His range of hands that he raises the flop and then bets again on the turn was weighted too heavily towards pocket twos. Or ace jack, against which I'm just chopping. So I'd actually decided to fold to the turn bet.
Like he's gonna have some bluffing hands in his flop range, like quite many of them, but he's not continuing on the turn.
Exactly.
So yeah, you can. Yep.
Exactly.
I totally agree. If it's your feeling at the moment, then I totally agree with it.
Okay.
And then the river play here is pretty interesting. I think it's a check just because you.
Yeah, there's not much value in a bet there. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, after I call a check raise,
if he bets like, let's say 130, what are you doing here?
I think I would have called there because because if he had a king 10 or 3-2s, he's betting the turn almost every time there. Once he checks back on the turn, I'm putting him on nothing. A bluff on the flop, or an ace that he got a little bit too aggressive with there on the flop. Like any ace. And even though ace king now beats me, I don't put that as enough of a part of his range because he didn't 3-bet pre-flop. And so therefore, and ace queen is betting again on the turn almost always. So therefore, I think once he checks back on the turn, I think my hand is going to be good. And it's not just a chop, because I think he'll bet the river sometimes with his missed his missed gut shots, because now all of a sudden it looks the board has obviously gotten a little more scary. So I think I had decided that I was gonna check and fold if he bet the turn, but given that he checked back on the turn, I was gonna check and call on the river. Do you agree?
Actually, I kind of disagree here. Because I think when he checks back the turn and then he bets the river, given how the board developed, he's gonna have a queen so often. Like every queen that you raise the flop with a gut shot, like queen 10 or king queen, is gonna check the turn 100% of the time, just because it kind of just got some showdown value. So he's gonna check that 100% of the time and then bet a pretty big bet on the river 100% of the time too. So I think I would have folded to a river just because he has a queen way too often, given the board and the action.
Yeah, actually, now that you say that, I'm starting to backtrack. I think I agree with you. I think you're right, and I was wrong there. I think that you're right. I didn't really give enough consideration to queen. There's not a lot of hands that he's going to bet on the river after checking back the turn, but I think that the hands that contain an ace in them are going to be reduced because they're sort of chopping, and he'll check back with most of them. And so even though pocket twos are no longer really in his range, nor is king 10, there's also, I think that after checking back on the turn, I don't think he's going to continue with a hand like 3-5 or something like that, or pocket fours like he had. So I take back what I said. Martin was right there. I think that I should fold to a river bet.
But one last thing, I think this would be the 6ES. If you were just a bit deeper, the 6ES check raise against some players, not against everybody, against players who are capable of making big folds, it could be the 6ES check raise river bluff here. Just because he is representing a queen so much.
Yeah, you're trying to get him to fold.
You know it.
Yeah,
you can check raise here because you have in your range full houses. You could have been trapping with aces on the flop. You can have ace queen a lot. You can have jack queen too. And you can have jacks. And he never ever has a full house in his range because he's continuing with any hand that is full house on the river. He's betting the turn 100% of the time, I think. So he never ever has like full house and nuts. So you can go ahead a bit deeper and check raise that river as a bluff. That would have been a perfect spot. And you have to do that against someone who is able to read the situation like I just read it, and who's not going to give you credit for turning like ace-jack into a bluff, but nobody ever does that. And since you basically never have air in your range, just because you call the flop raise, so you don't really have total air in your range, you know that he kind of has queen a lot when he bets the river. He's never going to think that, unless there's some sick leveling game, he's never going to think that you're trying to put him off a queen, therefore making him fold the queen, because it's going to put you on the full house, because you're just never ever shoving worse than king queen for value here.
Yeah, damn, you're good, Martin. I love that analysis. I absolutely love it. I hadn't even considered that, and I totally agree. Just to expand on that point, two things. One is the obvious point. Don't do it against someone who's not going to fold a queen.
Of course.
Yeah, and there's going to be a lot of players there. But your hand really looks legitimate there. So, a queen, quote unquote, should fold. And another thing that adds credibility to the play is if I had 3 aces, 3 jacks, or 3 twos on the flop, there is absolutely no reason to, go crazy with a re-raise on the flop.
You're playing that exactly that way, and you can even have ace queen and jack queen. Like, you have so many full houses in your range that it's perfect play against someone who can read the situation and arrive to the conclusion that, okay, like, he's never ever gonna try to make me fold king queen here. It would be stupid, but since he thinks it will be stupid, it becomes genius because he's gonna fold it.
Yeah. I totally agree. I love the idea. I love the play.
All right, cool.
I guess we're about close to an hour now. We can we have about, what is it, 13. Yeah, I guess this is a good point to stop because we have enough enough footage for the last video. I guess I'll stop it here. So,
right.
Great. Hope you guys have enjoyed this. There'll be one more part in my series. I think one more part. I do remember that there was a couple of really interesting and complicated spots at the end. So maybe there's a possibility it'll go two more, but probably just one, and then we'll head into Martin's.
All right. So yes, stay tuned, guys.
Okay.
It's going down.
All right, guys. See you later.
See